What is going on, guys? Welcome back into another episode of Rosscast. Thank you for listening if you're listening on Spotify or Apple. Thank you for watching if you're on YouTube. Make sure to check out the other one if you're using one of them. Check out the other one. Thank you guys for liking and subscribing. I appreciate it. Follow me at Shy Sports Ross on all the platforms. Okay, there's the intro. We've got some stuff to talk about today. This might be a shorter one just because it's really only Summer League that's going on right now. You know, the Cubs All-Star break right now. Bears are waiting to start training camp. And we got Bulls Summer League. It is the Summer League edition of Rosscast. We've played 3 games already. We have one more to go. Wednesday against the Bucks. Doesn't seem like the Bulls are going to be participating in the Summer League post-Summer League tournament, whatever they're calling it. So no Denzel Valentine game winner moment, unfortunately. But there's other good things to celebrate. There's other good things to talk about from Bulls Summer League. And we'll talk about that. We got to talk about Noa Essengue. We got to talk about Yuki Kawamura. We got to talk about Buzelis. And we'll also get to some free agency talk, get a catch up, get a little update on where Josh Giddey's situation sits at. But let's get into the Summer League discussion. We talk first about Yuki Kawamura. Kawamura has been extremely fun to watch in Summer League so far. The dude is a walking highlight reel. You've seen, you know, the highlight reel passes, some really slick passing, but it's more than that. I feel like, you know, today he had 15 points and 10 assists, a nice double-double. So obviously he's spreading the ball around and getting his teammates involved, but I think it goes beyond that. I think that he has good control, and we've also seen him hit some tough shots. And I feel like that's something that's impressive for a guy of his height. And I know that that's what's going to be talked about mostly with Yuki, is going to be the height, the size disadvantage that he's at. You know, like him and I are close in height. I think we might be the same exact height. Like, short kings stand up. Hell yeah, I love it. But I couldn't, dude. Imagine me playing. No, man. There's no, obviously he's not me, but the dude is good at using his size to his advantage, I feel like. You'll see him navigate through screens. He can kind of sneak through screens, so he doesn't really get screened hard. I haven't seen that much. And he can get low to the ground, both with his dribble, but also defensively. So when he's sneaking around those screens, I've seen him, you know, poke the ball free before the ball handler even knows where he's at. So, I mean, I think that he's able to use his height to his own advantage, and also seeing the court, you know, like you would think a shorter player would maybe lack some court vision, but that is not at all the case with Yuki. You know, he sees the floor like it's a playground, and, you know, he's had some like street ball style passing that we've seen, which is just, it creates some fun highlights, but I also think, you know, he's a fundamentally sound player overall. He's got a nice 3-point shot, just saw there. So the question then becomes, you know, if the Bulls want to keep Yuki on the roster, how could they do that? So they have 2-way slots that are all taken currently. Emmanuel Miller, Jameer Young, Lachlan Olbrich. Olbrich, obviously the 2nd round pick this season, so he's likely not going anywhere, at least right now. So that brings us to Miller and Young. I feel like we've seen the least from Miller in Summer League so far out of those 3. And we'll talk about Olbrich too, because I think he did have a good game as well today. But yeah, I think Miller would likely be the odd man out in that situation. But I know that fans also feel like the Bulls have too many guards, and maybe bringing in another back of the roster, end of the bench guard wouldn't be the best use of those spots. But in a 2-way slot, I think it's a little bit different. I think that that's where you experiment a little bit. The bigger question that could be answered is what they would be able to do to get him onto the actual roster. And I feel like the pretty clear-cut odd man out in that scenario would be Javon Carter. So Yuki was on a two-way contract last season with Memphis, but he is an unrestricted free agent right now, so any team can offer him a contract coming out of Summer League, and he's performed well. There might be a team that wants to try to sign him instead of the Bulls, and that might be, you know, something where you would want to give him that roster spot to try to convince him to come to Chicago instead of taking a two-way spot. So I like the idea of hanging on to Yuki just because he's fun and he's good vibes. And that's the idea behind a two-way spot, is to develop some young talent. And, that's what you could do with a player like Kawamura. But with the caveat, it is there is a ceiling on his game for sure in terms of competing in the NBA. Like he's not a starting level point guard. And I don't want to say never because that's not fair, but it's hard to envision that changing. So he's more of a utility player, but I think a good utility player at that. I'd be interested to see how he's able to contribute in an actual NBA setting. So Yuki has one more game on Wednesday against the Bucks to continue showing out and trying to earn that contract. We'll see how that goes. And if it ended up being Carter, that's a situation where the Bulls would have to waive him and eat that money. It's a tough sell with the current ownership situation. We'll see what happens, but I know fans would really enjoy seeing Kawamura back, especially in the preseason. Probably be a lot of fun highlights. So that's Kawamura. I have liked what I have seen from him so far. A lot of good things from Kawamura. Defensively, that's where the issue is going to come into play. But, like I said, I think he can hold his own in terms of navigating screens and trying to keep in front of guys. It's just the height. It's always going to be the height. It's always going to come back to the height. But speaking of someone who has height and length, talk about the rookie, Noa Essengue. He had a rough debut. We know that the first game against the Raptors was not the best, but that's okay. That happens. First summer league game. I mean, I think most players have had rough summer league debuts, and that's par for the course for a guy coming in from a different league, 18 years old, new team, new system, new teammates, new everything. And I would say, all things considered, he has steadily improved each game. And that's what you want. That's what you expect, is to see some of that, comfort, see him get a little bit more comfortable and see him start to chain some good plays together instead of just the flashes here and there. And that's what I felt like we saw, especially today against the Pacers, was him flashing that kind of do-it-all ability, scoring at 3 levels. I tweeted about this. Essengue ended up finishing the game with 21 points, and he was 3 for 8 from 3-point. And I liked how he was able to score from everywhere on the floor. He was hitting those threes. He had a very confident 3 from straight away, which is not an easy shot. Looked confident, drained it. But he also created some shots for himself. There was some mid-range self-creation. There was some cuts to the basket. And the length at the rim is one of his biggest strengths and is going to be hard for defenders to defend that. He did have a moment there in the second game where he had to leave with an injury, but it was a contusion. The results of contact, wasn't a non-contact injury, which would be worst case scenario. And he played again today, so not anything to be concerned about, it would appear. And he will have another opportunity as well. Same thing with Kawamura on Wednesday, to continue showing out and continue showing that progression. But I feel like we've seen the flashes on both ends. We've seen some blocks, we've seen some good rebounding, but we've also seen some good scoring and some improvement in his comfort level with that jump shot. Definitely seemed like in the first game he had some first game jitters. There was a couple air balls, but you could see in today's game against the Pacers, like, he was much more locked in. It seemed like he was confident, and he really felt like his shot was going to fall, and it did. So that's a very positive sign. And, I already mentioned it, but we're talking about a guy who is 18 years old, the second youngest player in the draft class, next to the number 1 overall pick. And I think it's encouraging. I think what we've seen so far from Essengue is encouraging. And I know that some Bulls fans were really upset with, the first game performance, but really, like, it's one game and he got better from there. So I wouldn't put too much stock in that. I wouldn't get too caught up in what happened in the first summer league game. I would just caution, not get too optimistic either on the opposite side, but I don't think that that's really what's happening. I don't think anyone is setting unrealistic expectations for Essengue right now. I think expectations are pretty tempered. We want to see him develop. We want to see, we know he's raw. We know he is a raw prospect. We want to see those flashes, become more consistent, become, instead of his game being, rawness with those flashes, reverse it, right? Being flash all the time. You want to flash, flash, flash. Actually, don't. You might get arrested. So, Essengue, good stuff. Very interested to see how Wednesday ends up going against the Bucks. Looking forward to the final Summer League game. But like I said, good stuff to feel good about. And I wouldn't get too hung up in the box scores and the analytics of it all. The eye test is important too. And I think you can see, he was competing hard in all of these games, even if he was struggling at times. And, that's what you like to see is a guy who has the mental fortitude, if he has a bad game, to come back and bounce back from that. So that's another good sign with Essengue. He did have a moment in the Pacers game today where he got yammed on. He got absolutely yammed on. It was a poster. It was probably one of the biggest highlights of Summer League this season. But he still came back, and he still kept fighting hard after that. I think he ended up scoring 4 or 5 more points after that dunk happened. So I'm not too concerned about, his mental makeup, which I know some people were bringing up with that first game and, first game jitters. Just everything we've seen since then, I feel like has been positive in terms of seeing him bounce back and rebound from that performance. And how about the other rookie? Let's talk about Lachlan Olbrich, because I was impressed with his performance today as well. I thought that coming into Summer League and reviewing Olbrich's tape, I see what his body type is, and I see kind of the mold of player that he could develop into, but I also see how he actually plays on the floor. And, while being a bigger, maybe looking more like a traditional center, he moves very fluidly. Yeah, I think it's a meme, right? It's played to death, but sneaky athletic. I do think that he kind of has that like he pulls out a coast to coast fast break out of nowhere, and you're like, oh shit, okay. Like, he's not just a big man. Like, this is a guy who, can make a shot for himself, dribble the ball. And we saw that a few times, I think, today, especially today against the Pacers. I felt like Olbrich was doing a good job of involving himself in the offense, making the right read with the ball. There were times where the Bulls were using him kind of as a hub, like they do with Nikola Vucevic in the regular season, where, he starts with the ball, the action revolves around him, maybe a dribble handoff, maybe they fake the dribble handoff and there's like a back cut. There was one play like that. Yeah, one play like that right here where you can see. So Olbrich has the ball here. It looks like they're going to run a dribble handoff. They fake it. Modest cuts, modest dunks. So that kind of stuff right there that Olbrich is handling well, and he's setting good screens. He's fighting for boards. So another guy that I have definitely been impressed with the tape from, impressed with his effort level and motor, and just good things in terms of, what the Bulls are trying to do at the end of the roster to develop talent. We talk about it all the time, the problems that the Bulls have in terms of bringing in young talent. You can make a case. I've made the case. Plenty of people make the case that they should be acquiring more young players, but with the understanding that it is what it is and we are where we are. I will say, all things considered, I am pretty happy with the development and with kind of the pool of young guys that we have on the team right now. I guess I'll just say it could be worse. I know that there's a lot of people out there, like there was a Bill Simmons clip going around recently about, how the Bulls have the worst future, or like he feels like we're the worst team or something like that. And, that's valid. Like, I don't think that the Bulls are a good team. I don't think that the Bulls are one of the top teams, but I don't think that the situation is as bleak as some people are making it out to be. I do think that there is a pool of talented young players on the roster right now who fit together, and there is kind of a long-term vision that I can see, for how some of these players could develop together. Speaking of the Josh Giddey of it all, having a guy who can play make and create shots for others, and then having these lengthy, rangy kind of guys who can get to the rim. It all plays together. There's a vision there. And I know right now it's not like they're headed towards anything significant, but laying the groundwork and having a fun young team is not something that I will be complaining about. So those are the rookies. That's Essengue and Olbrich. They're going to play with Windy City probably most of this upcoming season. And I think that's great. I think that we're going to see a lot of good things coming out of them in the G League. And that's exactly where they should be. Honestly, Olbrich, I think, is going to show some good stuff considering his mobility and his size. That'll be a huge advantage for him in the G League. And then Essengue, I think, getting more comfortable with his jump shot. That was something today that I felt like we didn't see yet earlier in the first two games. Was kind of that confidence and comfort in his shot and feeling, like he can get the full motion under him. The follow through was there. It felt like everything was kind of clicking for him. Getting good lifts on that shot. So that's what you want to see is, those tendencies start to develop. We've already talked about consistency. So that's what you're looking for when you have Olbrich and Essengue playing for Windy City next season. You want to see them develop some more consistency. You want to see how they do against more athletic competition on a night-to-night basis. So we'll see. Wednesday is their final game, and we'll get to see them one more time. And then, we'll hear all the stories coming out about what's going on in the weight room, and we'll see the off-season gym runs. We'll see the off-season gym runs and see how they're looking in those games. And then eventually we will get to the preseason and see how all of that has paid off. There's one player who I think we're going to see some big strides from, and that is, of course, Matas Buzelis, who is probably the most hyped player for the Bulls coming into next season, I would say. And for good reason. We saw him do some pretty impressive stuff in today's G League game, or today's Summer League game. We've seen him do some impressive stuff in the first Summer League game against the Raptors. He didn't play in the second one, but today he finished with 28 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists, 2 for 4 from 3, 8 for 14 overall, and a block. So, I mean, he also had, another insane dunk, another couple really good dunks. Javon Freeman Liberty threw it up to him, and he was able to go down and get it. So I think that, with a second-year player, what you're looking for is a little bit stronger, a little bit more confident, and a little bit more in command. And I think that you can say all of those things confidently for Matas Buzelis. He came in, it looked like immediately in that first game against the Raptors, was immediately looking to get some shots up, right? Like he was taking guys on in isolation. He was backing guys down, was trying to create for himself. And at times it looked a little bit forced. I would say that game wasn't his best performance, but you could definitely see the mentality. And you also never know what the coaching staff is saying to him in the background, saying like, yeah, we want to see you try to create some shots. Maybe that's what they're looking for. So we don't know that aspect of things, but I do think that we saw some good stuff from Matas in Summer League, especially today against the Pacers. Just total control on both ends of the floor. It looked like he was defending the ball well, but he was also looking for his shot, but he was also running the floor in transition. And it's interesting, he's still such a young player, but you see him on this Summer League team with players who are older than him. And it feels like he's in control. It feels like he's in charge. It feels like he's one of the leaders. And I think that's so impressive for a guy his age. Matas he checks all the boxes from a mentality perspective. He has the right mentality about improving his game, but not getting too high, not getting too egotistical or too cocky in himself, but having that edge still, that he believes he's the best. I am just super excited for him. And I think that, he has a big season ahead of him. And, we don't want to place lofty or unrealistic expectations on him. That's not the goal of what I'm doing or what I'm saying. What I'm saying is he's going to reap the benefits of the work that he's been putting in. And, that like you see the improvements in strength and how he's, finishing through contact even more. He was finishing through contact last season. You see it in Summer League already. He's not taking any shit from anybody down the lane. He is bullying his way to the rim. And that should get Bulls fans very, very excited. So Matas Buzelis, a lot to like in Summer League. It's Summer League. You don't want to overreact to anything. And that goes for positive or negative, right? You don't want to get too low. You don't want to get too negative about guys. These games ultimately don't really matter in terms of wins and losses and stats. But you also don't want to overlook it entirely, because I do think that, it shows you, like, you're seeing the work that these players have put in, right? For returning players, you're seeing the work that they have been putting in the offseason. For rookies, you're seeing kind of what they're coming in with and, where you want to go from there. So that's kind of the idea. And for the rest of the team, we've talked about Yuki a little bit, trying to find those guys to fill out the margins of the roster, to add some talent without, having to dip into free agency, do anything crazy. So we will see what ends up happening in terms of contracts coming out of Summer League. But speaking of free agency, we should probably, briefly check in on the Josh Giddey situation. Josh Giddey update? No update. Restricted free agency is like frozen in the league right now, at a standstill. No updates on Giddey, no updates on any of the restricted free agents around the league. Teams don't have the cap space right now to make an offer sheet that would be enticing for Giddey. So the Bulls really are his best option in terms of getting paid. There's also the qualifying offer, which he can play on for one season. But he has to make that decision by October 1st, which is when it expires. It can be extended from what I understand, but October 1st is the expiration on the qualifying offer. So we'll see what ends up happening there too. It's really a wait and see game. And it seems like a little bit of cat and mouse, who's going to blink first. And we've heard tons of rumors about, Giddey wants this, the Bulls don't want to pay that, yada, yada. I don't really know. And I'm not really going to speculate too much. I think that his range is 25 to 30. That seems to be in line with what other people are saying and, kind of what the market is saying. But he might want more than that. And that might be the sticking point. It's hard to say. There's really no way to know until we see what that contract ends up looking like. And we can have a little bit more context on what the conversations might have been. So keep an eye out for that. It really could happen at any point. I don't think that there's, I saw some people thinking about, oh, well, maybe it'll happen. Giddey's in Vegas for Summer League, AK's in Vegas for Summer League. Maybe it's happening now. Didn't seem to happen. That was a couple days ago. Didn't seem to happen. So I wouldn't hold my breath, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it happened at any moment. So we'll see. We shall see. But I told you guys probably be a shorter one. Summer League is the big topic of the week. And I think we've covered that expertly. Bulls, some good, some bad, but plenty of things to feel positively about headed into the most boring part of the offseason, certainly, which is going to be when we stop hearing updates from the team. Everybody goes away and does their own thing. And then they will reconvene for training camp, I think in September into October. So that's where things stand for the Bulls right now. I've got some more things coming up, though, that I want to talk about. We're going to do some more film reviews on some of the players that we've seen in Summer League. So that includes Kawamura, that includes Essengue, taking a look, deep dive into the tape. And I also want to take a look at Isaac Okoro and kind of revisit the trade. Now that the dust has settled a little bit, we've had some more time kind of digest it and think about it. I want to do a deep dive on his tape as well and kind of compare the numbers to the tape and, see what the full story is with Okoro and where he's at headed into his first season as a Bull. So thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Make sure to like and subscribe and rate and review if you are listening on one of those podcast apps. And drop your comments. I'm curious. I mentioned earlier in the episode, Yuki Kawamura on a two-way contract or just on the Bulls roster instead of one of their bench guards, probably Javon Carter. What are your thoughts? Would you be open to signing a player who is 5'8", 5'9"? How would you feel about keeping Yuki on the roster? And who would you cut to keep Yuki? Because you have to cut someone. You'd have to cut Emmanuel Miller or Jameer Young from one of those two-way spots. You'd have to make some room in the roster. Let me know in the comments. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. But thank you guys again so much for listening and watching. And we will talk again very soon.